The rain lashed against the darkened windows of the nondescript warehouse, mirroring the storm brewing inside John Bishop, though the world knew him better, and soon wouldn't know him at all, as Jason Statham. He was a ghost, a specialist in impossible situations, and tonight's mission was arguably his most audacious yet. He wasn't a cop. Not exactly. He operated in the gray areas, the spaces where governments couldn't or wouldn't tread. He was a deniable asset, a scalpel wielded with extreme prejudice. The scars crisscrossing his knuckles weren't just for show. They were a testament to a life lived on the edge, a life dedicated to righting wrongs that society preferred to ignore. But this was personal. His focus narrowed on the worn photograph lying on the metal table before him, a young woman, smiling brightly, her eyes full of life. His sister, she'd been a journalist, chasing a story about corruption within the private prison system. She'd vanished without a trace 6 months ago. The official report, accidental drowning. Bishop didn't buy it. He knew, in his gut, that the story she was chasing had led to her demise, and he intended to find out exactly who was responsible. He wasn't driven by blind rage. He was fueled by a cold, calculated determination. A promise made to her memory. He'd find the truth, expose the perpetrators, and deliver justice. His kind of justice. Bishop's unique skill set wasn't just about brute force. Though he possessed that in spades, he was a master of disguise, a chameleon who could blend into any environment. He was fluent in multiple languages, an expert in infiltration, and a strategist with an uncanny ability to anticipate his opponent's moves. He was also a damn good fighter. He surveyed the meticulously laid out equipment. Forged documents, a modified taser disguised as a lighter, a miniature camera concealed within a button. Each item was chosen for a specific purpose, each detail carefully considered. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a meticulously planned operation, months in the making. His past life had given him many enemies, but it had also provided him with a network of contacts, people who owed him favors, people who believed in his brand of justice. It was one of these contacts, a former Black Ops specialist named Silas, who had provided him with the intel on Blackwell Penitentiary, a privately owned hellhole where inmates were forced to fight to the death for the entertainment of wealthy gamblers. And it was Silas who had arranged for Bishop to be arrested and sent inside. He looked at himself in the cracked mirror, barely recognizing the hardened criminal staring back. The shaved head, the crude tattoos, the carefully cultivated air of menace. It was all a performance, a mask he would wear to survive in the brutal environment that awaited him. He was no longer John Bishop. He was now Joe, a hardened convict, serving time for aggravated assault. The transformation was complete, but beneath the surface, the ghost remained. The man driven by grief and a thirst for revenge. The man who would stop at nothing to uncover the truth and bring down those responsible for his sister's death. Blackwell Penitentiary was about to become his hunting ground, and the sadistic Warden, the puppet master behind the brutal games, was about to learn that he had made a very dangerous enemy, an enemy who was coming for him, disguised as one of his own. The rain intensified, a relentless downpour that seemed to wash away John Bishop, leaving only the promise of retribution in its wake. The game was about to begin. The transformation into Joe was complete, the promise of retribution hanging heavy in the air. Now came the briefing, the final laying out of the plan, the cold, hard facts about the hellhole he was about to enter. Silas, a gruff, scarred veteran of countless clandestine operations, sat opposite him in the dimly lit warehouse, a holographic projection of Blackwell Penitentiary shimmering between them. Blackwell, Silas began, his voice a low rumble, is a privately owned correctional facility, but that's just the sanitized term. It's a modern-day gladiator school. Warden Strickland runs the place like his own personal fiefdom. The holographic image shifted, showcasing various sections of the prison. The grimy cell blocks, the desolate exercise yard, and, most importantly, the arena, a makeshift fighting pit constructed in the center of the prison complex. The games, as they call them, are brutal, unregulated fights to the death. Inmates are forced to participate, drugged, and pitted against each other for the amusement of wealthy bettors. Strickland takes a healthy cut. Of course, it's a multi-million-dollar operation. Silas zoomed in on Warden Strickland's image. A man in his late 50s, with a steely gaze and a cruel smirk. He exuded an aura of power and control. Strickland's a sadist, Bishop. He enjoys the suffering. He's protected by layers of corruption, both inside and outside the prison walls. He's got guards on his payroll, local politicians in his pocket, and connections to the criminal underworld. My sister was investigating his operation? Bishop asked, his voice tight with suppressed anger. Silas nodded grimly. She got too close. She uncovered evidence of money laundering, bribery, and inmate abuse. She was about to go public when she disappeared. The official story doesn't hold water. Bishop. Strickland silenced her. The hologram displayed a map of the prison, highlighting key locations: the warden's office, the control room, the medical bay, and the power generator. Your objective is twofold, Silas continued. First, uncover the evidence linking Strickland to your sister's disappearance. Find out exactly what happened to her and expose him for his crimes. Second, shut down the games. Bring down Strickland's operation and free the inmates from his tyranny. And how do I do that? Bishop asked, his eyes fixed on the holographic image of the arena. From the inside, Silas replied, you'll need to gain the trust of the other inmates, identify Strickland's key players, and find a way to disrupt the system. It won't be easy. Blackwell is a dangerous place. Bishop, you'll be surrounded by hardened criminals, desperate men with nothing to lose. I can handle myself, Bishop said, his voice unwavering. I know you can, Silas replied. But you can't do it alone. I've got 2 contacts inside who can help you. The grizzled veteran named Razor, who knows the prison inside and out, and a young inmate named Luna, who's got a knack for hacking and surveillance. They're both trustworthy. But be careful who you confide in. Trust is a rare commodity in Blackwell. Silas handed Bishop a small device. This is a secure communication channel. Use it sparingly. Strickland's got sophisticated surveillance equipment. He'll be watching your every move. What about backup? Bishop asked. You're on your own, Silas replied. We can't risk exposing our operation. If you get caught, we'll deny any knowledge of your involvement. Bishop nodded, accepting the risks. He knew that this was a one-way trip. He was walking into the lion's den, and there was no guarantee that he would make it out alive. One more thing, Silas added. Strickland has a personal bodyguard, a hulking brute named Kage. He's a former MMA fighter, loyal to Strickland, and utterly ruthless. Avoid him if you can, but if you have to fight him, don't hold back. The briefing was over. The plan was set. Bishop was ready. He was about to enter Blackwell Penitentiary, a place where hope died and brutality reigned supreme. But he wasn't just any inmate. He was a force of nature, a reckoning waiting to happen, and Warden Strickland was about to learn that he had awakened a sleeping giant. The staged arrest was a crude affair, orchestrated by Silas and a couple of his contacts in the local police department. Bishop, now fully immersed in his Joe persona, put on a convincing show of drunken belligerence, picking a fight with a couple of burly construction workers outside a dive bar. The cops arrived, sirens blaring, and after a brief scuffle, Bishop was hauled off to jail. The charge: aggravated assault. The ride to Blackwell was a silent, grim affair. He sat in the back of the transport van, surrounded by hardened criminals, their faces etched with years of violence and despair. He observed them carefully, sizing them up, assessing the potential threats and alliances. Survival in Blackwell would depend on his ability to read people, to anticipate their moves, to exploit their weaknesses. The prison loomed in the distance. A concrete behemoth surrounded by razor wire and armed guard towers. It was a monument to despair. A place where hope went to die. As the van approached the gates, Bishop felt a surge of adrenaline, a mixture of fear and excitement. He was entering the belly of the beast, and he had no idea what awaited him inside. The processing was dehumanizing, a stripping away of identity and dignity. He was stripped naked, searched, and subjected to a barrage of insults and threats. His fingerprints and mugshot were taken, and he was issued a set of ill-fitting prison clothes. He was no longer John Bishop, the skilled operative. He was just another number, another piece of meat in the Blackwell grinder. As he was led to his cell, he passed through the main yard, a chaotic scene of inmates milling about, engaging in various activities. Some were lifting weights, Others were playing cards, and still others were simply staring blankly into space, their eyes devoid of hope. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense of danger lurking beneath the surface. It didn't take long for Bishop to attract attention. His size, his demeanor, his unwavering gaze, they all marked him as an outsider, a threat to the established order. That a group of inmates, led by a hulking brute with a shaved head and a menacing sneer, approached him, blocking his path. "New meat." The brute sneered, his eyes scanning Bishop from head to toe. "Looks like we got ourselves a tough guy." Bishop didn't flinch. He met the brute's gaze, his eyes cold and unwavering. "I'm just passing through," he said, his voice low and steady. "Not so fast," the brute replied, stepping closer. "In Blackwell, you gotta earn your respect. You gotta show us what you're made of." The other inmates circled around them, forming a ring. The tension in the air was palpable. Bishop knew that this was it. His first test. He could back down, try to avoid a fight, but that would only mark him as weak, a target for exploitation. He had to establish dominance, to show them that he wasn't someone to be trifled with. He cracked his knuckles, his eyes fixed on the brute. "I don't want any trouble," he said, his voice still calm. "But if you're looking for a fight, you've come to the right place." The brute grinned, revealing a set of yellowed teeth. "That's what I wanted to hear." He lunged at Bishop, throwing a wild haymaker. Bishop easily sidestepped the blow, grabbing the brute's arm and twisting it behind his back. The brute howled in pain as Bishop slammed him to the ground, pinning him beneath his weight. "Is that all you got?" Bishop asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The brute struggled to break free, but Bishop held him firmly in place. He looked around at the other inmates, his eyes daring them to intervene. They hesitated, unsure of what to do. They had expected an easy victory for their leader, but this new guy was clearly something else. Bishop released the brute, standing up and dusting himself off. "Next time," he said, his voice loud and clear, "think twice before you mess with me." He turned and walked away, leaving the stunned inmates in his wake. That he had passed his first test. He had established himself as someone to be reckoned with. He had taken his first step towards uncovering the truth about his sister's death and bringing down Warden Strickland's corrupt operation. He was in Blackwell now, and he was ready to fight. The fight had earned him respect, but it had also earned him enemies. The brute he'd taken down, a man named Spike, was now nursing a bruised ego and a burning desire for revenge, and Spike had friends, powerful friends within the prison hierarchy. Bishop knew he had to tread carefully. His cell was a cramped, dingy space shared with 3 other inmates. The stench of sweat, stale food, and desperation hung heavy in the air. His cellmates were a motley crew. A twitchy drug addict named Flicker, a silent, hulking giant known only as Titan, and an older, wizened man with knowing eyes named Razor. Bishop recognized him instantly from Silas's description. He was older than Bishop had anticipated. His face a roadmap of wrinkles and scars. His eyes holding a lifetime of stories. He sat on his bunk, calmly reading a tattered paperback, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around him. Bishop waited for the right moment, then approached Razor cautiously. "Razor?" he asked, his voice low. Razor looked up from his book, his eyes assessing Bishop with a sharp, intelligent gaze. "You must be Joe," he said, his voice raspy but clear. "Silas sent you, didn't he?" Bishop nodded. "I need your help." "I know," Razor replied, closing his book. "Silas told me about your sister. I'm sorry for your loss." "I'm not here for sympathy," Bishop said, his voice hardening. "I'm here for justice. That I want to know what happened to her." "And you think I can help you find out?" Razor asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Silas said you know this place inside and out," Bishop replied. "He said you know how Strickland operates." Razor chuckled. "That I do. Strickland's been running this place for years. He's a master manipulator. A puppet master pulling all the strings. He's got eyes and ears everywhere." "Then you know about the games," Bishop said. Razor's expression darkened. "The games are Strickland's pet project. He uses them to keep the inmates in line, to control the prison population. They're a brutal, barbaric spectacle, but they're also a lucrative business. Wealthy gamblers from all over the world bet on the fights. Strickland takes a healthy cut, of course." My sister was investigating the games, Bishop said. She must have uncovered something that Strickland didn't want her to see. That's likely, Razor replied. Strickland doesn't tolerate anyone interfering with his business. He'll do whatever it takes to protect his interests. I need to find evidence, Bishop said. Evidence that links Strickland to my sister's disappearance and to the corruption within the prison. That won't be easy, Razor replied. Strickland keeps a tight lid on things. He's got his loyal guards watching everything that goes on. But I know a few places where you might be able to find something. Like where? Bishop pressed. The Warden's office, Razor said. That's where Strickland keeps all his dirty secrets. But getting in there is suicide. It's heavily guarded. And Strickland's got surveillance cameras everywhere. There has to be a way, Bishop said, his determination unwavering. There is, Razor replied. But it's going to take time, planning, and a little bit of luck. And you're going to need help. He paused, looking at Bishop intently. I'm willing to help you, Joe. But you need to understand the risks. Strickland is a dangerous man. If he finds out what we're up to, he'll kill us both. Bishop met Razor's gaze, his eyes filled with resolve. I'm willing to take that risk, he said. My sister deserves justice, and I'm going to make sure she gets it. Razor nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. All right, Joe, he said. Let's get to work. And so, an unlikely alliance was formed in the heart of Blackwell Penitentiary, a seasoned operative seeking revenge, and a grizzled veteran seeking redemption. Together, they were about to embark on a dangerous journey into the dark heart of Strickland's corrupt empire, a journey that would test their limits, challenge their loyalties, and ultimately determine their fate. The exploration of the prison environment had begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. Razor was a font of information, a walking encyclopedia of Blackwell Penitentiary. Over the next few days, he guided Bishop through the labyrinthine corridors, revealing the hidden power dynamics, the unwritten rules, and the various factions vying for control. He pointed out the corrupt guards, the inmate informants, and the key players in Strickland's operation. This place is a jungle, Joe, Razor explained, as they walked through the exercise yard. You gotta know who to trust and who to avoid. And you gotta be ready to fight for what you want. Bishop also met Luna, Silas's other contact. She was younger than he expected, barely out of her teens, but her eyes held a sharp intelligence and a quiet determination. She worked in the prison laundry, a seemingly innocuous job that gave her access to much of the prison's inner workings. I can help you get into the surveillance system, Luna said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been mapping out the camera layouts and the blind spots. I can also help you bypass some of the security protocols. Luna was a valuable asset, a tech whiz who could navigate the digital landscape of Blackwell with ease. She provided Bishop with crucial intel about Strickland's security measures, and she helped him to communicate with Silas undetected. But amidst the allies, there were also enemies. Spike, still smarting from his defeat, was constantly lurking in the shadows, plotting his revenge. He spread rumors about Bishop, trying to turn the other inmates against him. He even attempted to sabotage Bishop's efforts to gather information. And then there was Kage, Strickland's personal bodyguard, a hulking behemoth of a man, with a shaved head, a scarred face, and a chillingly blank expression. Kage was Strickland's enforcer, his right-hand man, and he made it clear that he didn't trust Bishop. Their paths crossed several times in the prison yard, each encounter filled with unspoken threats and simmering tension. The mechanics of the games were brutal and straightforward. Inmates were selected, often, against their will and forced to fight in the arena. They were given minimal training, and the fights were often rigged, with Strickland and his cronies betting heavily on the outcome. The fights were broadcast live to wealthy gamblers around the world, generating a fortune for Strickland and his partners. Bishop witnessed one of the games firsthand. The atmosphere was electric, the crowd roaring with bloodlust. 2 inmates, emaciated and terrified, were forced into the arena, armed with makeshift weapons. The fight was short and brutal. 1 of the inmates was quickly overwhelmed, beaten to a pulp, and left for dead. The crowd cheered, reveling in the violence. Bishop watched the spectacle with disgust. He saw the fear in the inmates' eyes, the desperation in their movements. He saw the callous indifference of the guards, the smug satisfaction of the gamblers. He realized that Blackwell was more than just a prison. It was a modern-day Colosseum, where human lives were sacrificed for the amusement of the wealthy and powerful. Amidst the darkness and brutality, Bishop found an unexpected connection with another inmate, a young woman named Anya, who worked in the prison infirmary. She was kind, compassionate, and fiercely independent. She treated the wounded inmates with care and respect, offering them a glimmer of hope in a place where hope was scarce. Anya was drawn to Bishop's quiet strength and his unwavering determination. She saw something in him that reminded her of herself, a desire to fight for what was right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. They began to talk, sharing their stories, their hopes, and their fears. A tentative bond formed between them, a spark of humanity in the midst of the dehumanizing environment of Blackwell Penitentiary. Whether it would blossom into something more remained to be seen, but Anya's presence offered Bishop a much-needed respite from the brutality and the constant danger. She became a potential something. A reason. Perhaps he was learning the lay of the land, navigating the treacherous social currents, and gathering the information he needed to bring down Strickland's operation. He was making allies, and he was making enemies. He was becoming a part of the Blackwell ecosystem, a predator in a den of vipers, and he was getting closer to uncovering the truth about his sister's death. The summons came unexpectedly. Two guards, their faces impassive, arrived at Bishop's cell and ordered him to follow them. Razor exchanged a worried glance with Bishop, but there was nothing they could do. Resistance was futile. As they led him through the corridors, Bishop knew where they were headed. The arena that he had been selected to participate in the games. That he hadn't sought it out, hadn't volunteered, but Strickland clearly wanted to see what he was capable of. Or perhaps he simply wanted to eliminate a potential threat. He tried to assess his situation, to formulate a plan. That he didn't want to participate in the games, didn't want to contribute to Strickland's twisted entertainment. But he also knew that refusing would be a death sentence. That he had to play along, to use the opportunity to his advantage. As he entered the arena, the roar of the crowd washed over him. The atmosphere was even more intense than he remembered. The air was thick with anticipation, with the primal urge for violence. He scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces. He saw Strickland, sitting in his private box, a smug expression on his face. He also saw Anya, her eyes filled with concern. His opponent was a hulking mass of muscle, a veteran of the games known as Bruiser. He was heavily tattooed, scarred, and his eyes were devoid of any emotion. Bruiser was a formidable opponent, a killing machine honed by countless battles in the arena. The guards stripped Bishop of his prison clothes, leaving him naked and vulnerable. They handed him a crude weapon, a sharpened piece of metal attached to a wooden handle. It was a pathetic excuse for a weapon, but it was all he had. The bell rang, signaling the start of the fight. Bruiser charged at Bishop, bellowing like a wounded animal. Bishop sidestepped the attack, using Bruiser's momentum against him. He lashed out with his makeshift weapon, aiming for Bruiser's leg. The metal blade sliced through Bruiser's flesh, drawing blood. Bruiser roared in pain, stumbling backward. Bishop pressed his advantage, attacking Bruiser with a flurry of blows. He targeted Bruiser's weak spots, his knees, his elbows, his eyes. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to send a message. He was showing Strickland that he wasn't just another inmate, that he was a force to be reckoned with. Bruiser fought back with a savage ferocity, but Bishop was too quick, too skilled. That he dodged Bruiser's attacks, countering with precise strikes. He used his knowledge of pressure points to disable Bruiser, to weaken him, to break his spirit. The fight went on for several minutes, a brutal ballet of violence and survival. The crowd was on its feet, screaming and cheering. Strickland watched with a mixture of fascination and concern. He had underestimated Bishop. Finally, Bishop saw his opportunity. Bruiser was exhausted, weakened, and vulnerable. Bishop feigned an attack, drawing Bruiser off balance. Then, with a swift, decisive movement, he struck Bruiser in the throat with his weapon. Bruiser gasped, his eyes widening in shock. He stumbled backward, clutching at his throat, trying to breathe. But it was too late. He collapsed to the ground, his body convulsing. The crowd erupted in a frenzy. Some cheered, while others booed. They had witnessed a brutal and decisive victory. Bishop had proven himself to be a formidable fighter, a force to be reckoned with. Bishop stood over Bruiser's lifeless body, his chest heaving, his body covered in sweat and blood. He looked up at Strickland, His eyes cold and unwavering, he had sent his message. He was not to be trifled with. As the guards dragged Bruiser's body out of the arena, Bishop was led back to his cell. He was battered and bruised, but he was alive. He had survived his first game, and he had solidified his reputation as a dangerous and ruthless inmate. The participation in the game served its purpose. Bishop had proven his capabilities, but the price was high that he had taken a life, and that weighed heavily on his conscience. But he knew that it was necessary, that it was part of the game he had to play to achieve his ultimate goal. The investigation into Strickland's operation would continue, now with a renewed sense of urgency and determination. Bishop's victory in the arena had bought him respect, but it had also put him under even closer scrutiny. Strickland's eyes were always on him. Kage was a constant shadow, and Spike was still plotting his revenge. But Bishop was undeterred. He continued his investigation, working with Razor and Luna to uncover the truth about Strickland's operation. Luna, using her hacking skills, managed to access the prison's internal network, revealing a complex web of financial transactions, coded messages, and incriminating documents. She discovered evidence of money laundering, bribery, and embezzlement, all linked to Strickland and his associates. "Strickland's got his fingers in everything, Joe," Luna said, her voice filled with disgust. "He's skimming money from the prison budget, taking kickbacks from suppliers, and even selling drugs to the inmates. He's turning this place into his own personal ATM." Razor, using his network of contacts within the prison, uncovered the identities of the underground bettors who were funding the games. They were a who's who of the criminal underworld: wealthy businessmen, corrupt politicians, and notorious gangsters. They were all eager to wager vast sums of money on the brutal spectacle of the arena. "These guys are ruthless, Joe," Razor warned. "They don't care about the inmates. They just want to make money. And they're willing to do anything to protect their investments." Bishop also learned the true extent of Strickland's cruelty. He discovered that Strickland was not only profiting from the games, but he was also actively manipulating them. He would drug the inmates, pit them against each other based on personal grudges, and even order the guards to interfere in the fights to ensure a particular outcome. "Strickland enjoys the suffering, Joe," Razor said. "He gets off on the power, on the control. He sees the inmates as nothing more than pawns in his twisted game." The investigation also revealed new information about Bishop's sister's disappearance. Luna discovered a series of deleted emails between Strickland and a local politician, discussing a problem that needed to be taken care of. The emails were vague, but they strongly suggested that Strickland was involved in his sister's murder. Bishop felt a surge of anger, a burning desire for revenge. He knew that he was getting closer to the truth, but he also knew that he was running out of time. Strickland was becoming increasingly suspicious, and he was tightening his grip on the prison point. One day, while Bishop was working in the prison laundry, he overheard a conversation between two guards. They were discussing a shipment of drugs that was scheduled to arrive the following day. The drugs were intended for the inmates, but Strickland was planning to skim off a portion of the shipment and sell it on the black market. Bishop saw an opportunity. He could use the drug shipment to expose Strickland's corruption and to gather more evidence against him. He shared the information with Razor and Luna, and they began to formulate a plan. "We can't let this shipment go through, Joe," Razor said. "It's too dangerous. It'll only make things worse for the inmates." "I agree," Luna said. "We need to find a way to intercept the shipment and expose Strickland for what he is." Bishop knew that it was a risky plan, but he was willing to take the chance. He was determined to bring down Strickland. No matter the cost, he was getting closer to uncovering the truth about his sister's death, and he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. The scope of the Warden's cruelty was now clear, and the network that enabled it was coming into focus. It was time to act. The plan to intercept the drug shipment was intricate, relying on Luna's hacking skills to disable security cameras and Razor's knowledge of the prison's blind spots. Bishop would be the muscle, leading a small team of trusted inmates to seize the shipment before it reached Strickland. But as they prepared to move, Bishop noticed something was off. Luna seemed unusually nervous, avoiding eye contact and making excuses to leave the group. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His suspicions were confirmed when Razor pulled him aside, his face grim. "I overheard Luna talking to Kage," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's been working for Strickland all along." Bishop felt a surge of betrayal, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He had trusted Luna, relied on her skills and her intelligence. Now, he realized that she had been playing him, feeding information to Strickland and sabotaging his efforts. "Are you sure?" Bishop asked, his voice tight with anger. "I heard it myself," Razor replied. "She told Kage about our plan to intercept the drug shipment. Strickland knows everything." Bishop knew that they were in deep trouble. Strickland would be waiting for them, ready to spring a trap. They had to act fast, to change their plans, to salvage the situation. He confronted Luna, cornering her in the prison laundry. "It's over, Luna," he said, his voice cold and accusing. "We know you're working for Strickland." Luna's face paled, her eyes filled with fear. She didn't deny it. "I had no choice," she said, her voice trembling. "Strickland threatened my family, that he said he would hurt them if I didn't cooperate." Bishop felt a flicker of sympathy, but he couldn't let her off the hook. She had betrayed him, jeopardized his mission, and put his life in danger. "I'm sorry, Joe," Luna said, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," Bishop replied, his voice hardening. "Now, you're going to help us fix this." He forced Luna to reveal Strickland's plan, to explain how he intended to ambush them. He then used that information to devise a counter-strategy, to turn the tables on Strickland. The interception of the drug shipment became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Bishop and his team, now aware of Strickland's trap, used their knowledge of the prison to evade the guards, to navigate the blind spots, and to outmaneuver their pursuers. A tense confrontation ensued in the prison's loading dock. Bishop and his team were surrounded by Strickland's guards, led by Kage. The air was thick with tension, with the threat of violence. "It's over, Bishop," Kage said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Strickland knows everything. You're out of options." "We'll see about that," Bishop replied, his eyes fixed on Kage. A fierce firefight erupted, the loading dock exploding with gunfire. Bishop and his team fought with a desperate ferocity, using their makeshift weapons and their knowledge of the environment to their advantage. Bishop engaged Kage in a brutal hand-to-hand combat. The two men were evenly matched, each possessing incredible strength and fighting skills. They traded blows, each punch and kick carrying the force of a sledgehammer. The fight was intense, brutal, and unrelenting. Bishop knew that he had to win, that his life, and the lives of his allies, depended on it. He pushed himself to the limit, drawing on his training, his experience, and his unwavering determination. Finally, Bishop saw his opportunity. He dodged one of Kage's attacks, grabbing him by the arm and twisting it behind his back. He then delivered a swift, decisive blow to Kage's head, knocking him unconscious. With Kage down, Bishop and his team managed to break through the guards and escape the loading dock. They were battered and bruised, but they were alive. They had survived the betrayal, the ambush, and the firefight. But they knew that Strickland would be coming for them, and that their fight was far from over. The narrow escape had changed everything. Trust was now a luxury they couldn't afford. The failed drug interception and Luna's betrayal had decimated Bishop's operation. They were now fugitives within Blackwell, hunted by Strickland and his guards. Trust was shattered, and the remaining allies were scattered and fearful. Bishop knew that he had to act quickly to regain control and to salvage his mission. He sought out Razor, the one person he knew he could still trust. They met in a hidden corner of the prison library, a place where they could speak without being overheard. "We're running out of time, Razor," Bishop said, his voice grim. "Strickland's going to come down on us hard. We need to do something drastic." "I know," Razor replied, "but what can we do? We're outnumbered, outgunned, and Strickland controls everything." "We need to expose him," Bishop said. "We need to reveal his corruption to the outside world, to force the authorities to intervene." "How?" Razor asked. "Strickland's got the whole system rigged. He's got guards on his payroll, politicians in his pocket. Nobody's going to believe us." "We have the evidence," Bishop replied. "Luna helped us gather enough incriminating documents to bring Strickland down. We just need to find a way to get them out of the prison." He then revealed his plan: to incite a prison riot, to use the chaos and confusion to their advantage. to slip past the guards and transmit the evidence to Silas. A riot? Razor asked, his eyes widening in disbelief. That's insane, Joe. People will get hurt. People will die. I know, Bishop replied. But it's the only way. We need to create a diversion, to draw Strickland's attention away from our main objective. He also planned to target the arena, to dismantle the fighting ring from within. He would rally the other inmates, to convince them to refuse to fight, to sabotage the games, to bring Strickland's operation to a standstill. The games are Strickland's lifeblood, Bishop explained. If we shut them down, we'll hit him where it hurts. We'll show him that we're not just pawns in his twisted game. Razor was hesitant, but he eventually agreed to help. He knew that Bishop's plan was risky, but he also knew that it was their only chance. They began to rally their remaining allies, to spread the word, to gather support. They spoke to the other inmates, appealing to their sense of justice, to their desire for freedom. They told them about Strickland's corruption, about his cruelty, about his exploitation of the games. Slowly, but surely, the inmates began to respond. They were tired of being treated like animals, tired of being forced to fight for their lives. They were ready to stand up to Strickland, to take back control of their prison. Anya, despite her fear, offered her support. She used her position in the infirmary to spread the word, to treat the wounded, and to provide medical supplies to those who were preparing to fight. Even Luna, racked with guilt and remorse, offered to help. She used her hacking skills to disable security systems, to disrupt communications, and to create chaos within the prison's infrastructure. With his allies rallied, Bishop began to put his plan into action. He organized the inmates, assigning them roles and coordinating their efforts. He prepared them for the riot, teaching them how to fight, how to defend themselves, and how to work together. The atmosphere within Blackwell Penitentiary was electric, charged with tension and anticipation. The inmates were ready to revolt, to take back their prison, and to expose Strickland for his crimes. The dismantling of the prison's fighting ring and the warden's exposure were now within reach. The stage was set for a final, desperate showdown. The door splintered inwards, revealing Strickland's opulent office, a stark contrast to the squalor of the prison. Strickland himself sat behind a large mahogany desk, a look of surprised fury on his face. He wasn't alone. Kage, miraculously recovered from their previous encounter, stood beside him, his eyes burning with hatred. "So, you made it," Strickland said, his voice laced with venom. "I underestimated you, Bishop. But it ends here." "It ends with you, Strickland," Bishop replied, his voice cold and unwavering. "Your games are over." Strickland smirked. "You think you can stop me? You're just one man. I have an army at my command." He gestured to Kage, who stepped forward, his massive frame filling the doorway. "Kage will take care of you." Bishop knew that this was it, the final showdown. He had to defeat Strickland, to expose his corruption, and to avenge his sister's death. But he also had to contend with Kage, a formidable opponent who was determined to protect his master. He lowered his weapon, preparing for a hand-to-hand combat. He knew that he couldn't defeat Kage in a gunfight. He had to get up close and personal, to use his skills and his strength to his advantage. The two men lunged at each other, their bodies colliding with a thunderous crash. They traded blows, each punch and kick carrying the force of a sledgehammer. Kage was a powerhouse, his attacks relentless and brutal. But Bishop was quicker, more agile, and more skilled. He dodged Kage's attacks, countering with precise strikes. He used his knowledge of pressure points to disable Kage, to weaken him, to break his spirit. The fight raged through the office, destroying furniture, shattering windows, and leaving a trail of blood and destruction in its wake. Strickland watched in horror, his smug expression replaced by a look of fear. Bishop managed to disarm Kage, stripping him of his weapon. He then used the weapon to his advantage, striking Kage with a series of blows. Kage staggered backward, his body battered and bruised. He collapsed to the ground, defeated. His eyes filled with pain and disbelief. With Kage out of the way, Bishop turned his attention to Strickland. The warden scrambled for a hidden weapon under his desk, but Bishop was too fast. He lunged across the room, grabbing Strickland by the throat. "It's over, Strickland," Bishop said, his voice a low growl. "Your reign of terror is at an end." Strickland struggled, gasping for air, His face turning purple, he tried to speak, to beg for mercy. But Bishop silenced him with a swift, decisive blow. He didn't kill Strickland. He wanted him to face justice, to answer for his crimes. He dragged Strickland to the window, holding him up for the other inmates to see. "This is your warden," Bishop shouted, his voice echoing through the prison yard. "A corrupt, sadistic monster who has been exploiting you for years. He is responsible for the games, for the drugs, for the violence, and for the death of my sister." He then threw Strickland to the ground, leaving him to face the wrath of the other inmates. The riot had reached its climax, and the downfall of Warden Strickland was complete. The confrontation was at hand. The inmates surged towards Strickland. A seething mass of fury and vengeance, Bishop knew that he couldn't let them kill him. He needed Strickland alive. To face justice for his crimes, he fought his way through the crowd, shielding Strickland from their attacks. "He's mine," Bishop shouted, his voice commanding. "He'll answer for what he's done. But he'll do it in a court of law, not here." The inmates, reluctantly, obeyed. They stepped back, allowing Bishop to drag Strickland away. He secured Strickland in his office, locking the door and posting guards to prevent anyone from getting to him. But the riot was far from over. The prison was still in chaos, with inmates clashing with guards, fires raging, and the air thick with smoke and violence. Bishop knew that he had to restore order. To bring an end to the bloodshed, he contacted Luna, asking her to use her hacking skills to disable the prison's communication system to prevent Strickland from calling for reinforcements. He then contacted Silas, using the secure communication channel, informing him of the situation and requesting immediate assistance. Silas assured him that help was on the way, but it would take time for the authorities to arrive. In the meantime, Bishop was on his own, responsible for maintaining order and protecting the inmates. He rallied the remaining guards, the ones who weren't corrupt and organized, them into a defensive force. He instructed them to protect the innocent inmates, to put out the fires, and to restore order to the prison. He then turned his attention to the arena, the heart of Strickland's corrupt operation. He gathered a team of inmates, including Anya, and marched towards the fighting pit, determined to dismantle it once and for all. They encountered resistance from Strickland's loyalists, the inmates who profited from the games. A fierce battle ensued, a final showdown between those who supported Strickland's reign of terror and those who sought to bring it to an end. Bishop fought with a renewed sense of purpose, his determination fueled by the memory of his sister, by the sacrifices of his allies, and by the hope for a better future. He defeated Strickland's loyalists, dismantling the arena, and freeing the inmates from their forced servitude. As the sun began to rise, the riot gradually subsided. The fires were extinguished, the fighting ceased, and order was slowly restored to Blackwell Penitentiary. The authorities arrived, taking control of the prison and arresting Strickland and his corrupt associates. The inmates who participated in the riot were treated fairly, their voices heard, and their grievances addressed. Bishop had accomplished his mission. He had exposed Strickland's corruption, dismantled his operation, and avenged his sister's death. But he had also paid a heavy price. He had lost friends. He had witnessed violence and suffering, and he had been forced to make difficult choices. The extended fight had taken its toll. The aftermath was a scene of devastation and hope. Blackwell Penitentiary, once a symbol of corruption and despair, was now under the control of the authorities, its future uncertain. The surviving inmates, scarred and traumatized, faced an uncertain future, but they also had a newfound sense of hope, a belief that things could change. Strickland and his corrupt associates were arrested and charged with a long list of crimes, including murder, racketeering, and human rights violations. The evidence that Bishop and his allies had gathered was irrefutable, ensuring that they would face justice for their actions. The authorities launched a full-scale investigation into the private prison system, uncovering widespread corruption and abuse. Blackwell Penitentiary was shut down permanently, its inmates transferred to other facilities, and its land slated for redevelopment. Bishop, his mission accomplished, prepared to leave. Blackwell, he had avenged his sister's death, exposed Strickland's corruption, and brought an end to the brutal games. But he had also lost friends, witnessed violence and suffering, and been forced to make difficult choices. The experience had changed him, leaving him scarred but also stronger, more determined, and more committed to fighting for justice. He sought out Anya, finding her tending to the wounded in the infirmary. They shared a brief, silent moment, their eyes conveying a depth of emotion that words could not express. "Thank you, Joe," Anya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved us all." "We saved each other," Bishop replied. His voice filled with sincerity. He knew that he couldn't stay in Blackwell. He had a life to return to, a world to explore, and battles to fight. But he also knew that he would never forget the people he had met in Blackwell, the sacrifices they had made, and the lessons he had learned. He walked out of the prison gates, leaving behind the chaos and the violence, and stepping into the sunlight. He was no longer Joe, the hardened convict. He was John Bishop, the specialist in impossible situations, ready to take on his next mission. Silas was waiting for him, a grim smile on his face. "Mission accomplished, Bishop," he said. "You did good." "It's over, Silas," Bishop replied. "It's time to go home." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving behind the ruins of Blackwell Penitentiary, and stepping into an uncertain future. The surviving inmates, left to rebuild their lives, faced a similar uncertainty. Luna, burdened by her betrayal, sought redemption by helping other inmates navigate the system. The memory of Razor, and the sacrifices made, would forever serve as a reminder of the cost of freedom, and the importance of fighting for what is right. The prison was closed, the guilty were apprehended, and Bishop was gone. His work was done.